I wasn't supposed to be there. The charity gala was Sarah's world. An elegant, carefully curated environment of polished introductions and white wine networking. People in silk gowns and tuxedos, murmuring about sustainability and social impact while eyeing each other's net worth. I usually stayed home when she had events like this. Not because I didn't care, I did, but because I never quite felt like I belonged. But that night, I don't know. I missed her. We'd been drifting for weeks, maybe months, and I kept telling myself it was just a busy season for both of us. Work, stress, that kind of thing. Still, something inside me told me to show up, to try, to do something she wouldn't expect in the best way possible. So I drove out to that old southern estate, the one she'd gushed about for weeks. It had been converted into an upscale venue. Arched windows, wrought iron balconies, towering columns wrapped in fairy lights. The kind of place that looked like a movie set frozen in time. Before arriving, I stopped at a florist and picked up lilies, her favorite since college. It felt like a small gesture, but I figured maybe small things still meant something. The moment I walked into the ballroom, I was overwhelmed by the atmosphere. A soft string quartet played in the corner, and laughter spilled from crystal glasses. I searched the room, scanning the crowd for Sarah. First, I couldn't find her. Then I caught a glimpse through one of the French doors leading out onto a stone patio near a side exit. She was standing with a man. Tall, well-groomed, expensive-looking in that effortless way. His hand rested casually, but a little too confidently, on the small of her back. She was leaning toward him, not speaking but listening intently, her expression open. Her smile was soft in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Not with me. I stood there for a second, frozen. Not out of jealousy, at least not right away, but confusion. It was the Macy. The comfort. Like they were already mid-conversation when I entered the frame, like I was the interruption. Then she saw me. The transformation was immediate. She straightened, shifted a step to the side, brushing his hand away with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. When I walked over, flowers in hand, she blinked like I'd startled her. I'll never forget that pause. Just a flicker in her eyes, but it told me something. I didn't know what yet, but I felt it. You always feel it before you understand it. David, she said, smiling. That practiced, professional smile she gave to board members and reporters. Not the real one. I didn't know you were coming. I held out the lilies. Thought I'd surprise you. Oh, that's sweet. She took them but didn't look at them. She glanced at the man beside her, then back at me. This is Greg, he's on the donor board. We were talking about the new education initiative. Greg gave me a handshake that was too smooth and too short. Pleasure, he said, but his eyes didn't match his voice. They flicked toward Sarah for just a second. A familiar second. I nodded. Thanks for all you're doing for the foundation. The whole thing lasted maybe a minute. But by the time we parted ways, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. Sarah didn't offer for me to stay. She didn't introduce me to anyone else. She didn't say, I'll be done soon. Let's grab a drink. She said she had to get back to managing the event, and I took the hint. On the drive home, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe I'd misread the body language. Maybe it was just a moment that looked different from the outside. That's the trouble with trust. It makes you talk yourself down from the edge even when your gut is screaming. When Sarah got home later that night, everything felt colder. It was like I'd walked into a version of our house where nothing had actually changed, but everything had. She took off her heels by the door, dropped her purse on the counter, and didn't say much beyond thanks for coming. I waited a beat. You seemed surprised to see me. I was, she said, heading upstairs. Greg seemed friendly. She paused on the staircase, her back still to me. He's just someone I work with. That's how networking works. I wasn't accusing. I didn't say you were. And that was it. She disappeared into the bedroom, and I was left standing at the bottom of the stairs with silence thick enough to choke on. Later that night, lying in bed next to her, if you could even call it lying with her, I could feel the distance like a wall between us. I looked over at her in the dark, hoping she might sense it too, that she might reach out or say something like, "That was weird tonight, huh?" But she didn't. She faced away from me, her breathing slow and even. Not asleep, just done talking. And I didn't push. Couldn't. I had this overwhelming fear that if I asked even one more question, something would fall apart, and we wouldn't be able to put it back together again. So I laid there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a guest in my own marriage. That moment at the gala replayed in my head again and again, like my brain refused to let it settle. Her posture. That hand. The way she'd laughed after stepping back, like she was resetting the scene for me. I could still feel the chill in her voice when she introduced me like an afterthought. It's funny. You always think the first sign of something breaking will be loud. A fight. A confession. A slammed door. But it wasn't. Not for us. It was a moment so quiet, so ordinary looking, it could almost be dismissed. Almost. The moment at the gala didn't fade. It settled into my mind like a splinter, small, persistent, impossible to ignore. I tried to let it go, tried to push past the feeling that something was off, but it followed me around like a shadow. Every quiet moment after that night became suspect. The more I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, the more I noticed the things that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. I started replaying old moments with new eyes. Sarah's late nights at the office weren't new, but now they felt longer. Her texts had always been brief, she wasn't a wordy person, but now they felt sterile. Functional. Be home late. Don't wait up. Or need to prep for client meeting. Short. Cold. All business. The kind of messages you send to a colleague, not someone you share a life with. And the warmth between us, that quiet, familiar tenderness we used to share in even the smallest ways, had disappeared without either of us saying a word. No more miss you texts in the middle of the day. No more arms finding each other in bed. No more laughter spilling out over nothing in the kitchen. The space between us was growing, and I kept pretending I didn't see it. But I did. I saw it when she stopped reaching for my hand during long drives. When she started locking her phone screen the moment I walked into the room. When she called our home, the home I had built brick by brick with my own hands, a little too quiet lately. Quiet. That was the word she used. But what she meant was empty. I remember the way her voice changed when she said it. We were having coffee on the back porch, watching the fog roll over the fields. I loved those mornings. We used to sit in silence, her head resting on my shoulder, our hands warm around chipped mugs. But that morning, she sat on the far side of the table, one leg crossed tightly over the other, tapping her fingernail against the ceramic like she couldn't wait for the moment to be over. I've been thinking, she said, not looking at me, maybe we should spend more time in the city. Things are happening there. This place, it's starting to feel isolated. That word clanged in my ears. Isolated. Like the home we dreamed of together had become a cage she couldn't wait to escape. I tried to laugh it off. We picked this place because we didn't want all that noise. You said you loved the stillness. That was before, she said. And that was the end of the conversation. Before what? I wanted to ask. Before the gala? Before Greg? Before me? But I didn't ask. I nodded like a coward and changed the subject to something safer. Anything but the truth that was sitting between us, silent and obvious. That afternoon, I went down to the basement and opened the old wooden trunk where we kept the remnants of our early years, scrapbooks, photos, handwritten notes. It wasn't something I did often, but I felt this ache to remember what it used to feel like. I needed to see it in writing. I needed proof that we were real once. There was a note from our first anniversary. You make the quiet feel full, she had written in looping handwriting. Like the world finally makes sense when you're beside me. I ran my fingers over the ink, trying to imagine the woman who had meant those words. I didn't recognize her anymore. It scared me how fast someone could drift out of reach without ever leaving the room. The following days were filled with moments I might have ignored a year ago. Now, they felt like pieces of a puzzle that refused to stay scattered. She changed her password. I noticed because I'd used her phone before to play music through the car's Bluetooth, and when I asked for it again, she hesitated. That pause, less than a second, was all I needed. She handed me the phone but kept watching me like she was afraid I'd tap the wrong icon and unravel everything. There was no evidence, not yet. Nothing concrete. Just a dozen small changes, each too subtle to call out on its own. But when stacked together, they painted a different version of reality than the one I'd been clinging to. It was in the way she avoided eye contact when I asked about her day. In how she started referring to things as mine instead of ours. My work trip. My schedule. My weekend. We used to be a team. Now we were two calendars trying not to overlap. One night I decided to wait up for her. She had texted again that she'd be home late. Team happy hour turned into dinner. Don't wait up. I waited anyway. I sat in the living room with the lights off, nursing a beer that had gone warm, watching headlights pass through the windows. She didn't get home until after midnight. When she walked through the door, she didn't flinch at the sight of me sitting there in the dark. She just dropped her keys in the bowl and said, "I told you not to wait." "I know," I replied. "Just wanted to see you." She gave me a small smile, the kind you give a neighbor you're trying not to offend. "I'm exhausted. Big day tomorrow." Then she walked upstairs, leaving me there with nothing but the ticking of the kitchen clock. I stared at the front door, thinking about how many times she had walked through it looking like a stranger. The next morning, I tried again. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee the way she liked it. She came down in a rush, already dressed for work, barely glancing at the plate. "What's this?" she asked. "Thought we could eat together." She looked at her watch. "I'm late already." She grabbed a travel mug, gave me a quick peck on the cheek, cool and obligatory, and was gone. I sat at the table alone, staring at the 2 plates growing cold. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. That afternoon, I found myself driving by her office. I told myself it was on the way to the hardware store, but that was a lie. I just wanted to see her car. To know she was where she said she was. When I saw it in the lot, I felt both shame and relief. What was I doing? Playing detective in my own marriage? I hated the version of myself that doubt was turning me into. But what else could I do? She wasn't talking to me. She wasn't reaching for me. She was there physically, but emotionally she was living somewhere I didn't have the address to. That night, lying in bed, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Smiles from weekend hikes, sun-drenched vacations, her in my hoodie making pancakes on a lazy Sunday. I stared at them for hours, trying to pinpoint the moment the light started to dim. You don't notice when the fading begins. Not at first. You just wake up one day and realize you've been living in the dusk. I finally asked her the next morning, in the quiet moment between the alarm clock and her getting out of bed. "Are you happy?" She didn't answer right away. She sat up, running her hands through her hair. Then she said, "I don't know." 3 words. That was all. But they echoed louder than any argument we'd ever had. "I don't know." I wanted to say, "Then let's fix it." I wanted to say, "I'm right here." But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I wasn't sure if she even wanted it fixed. And that hurt more than anything. That weekend, she said she was heading out of town for a retreat with her team. Some leadership thing. I nodded like I believed her. Like I didn't feel the hollow ache of knowing she was taking pieces of herself somewhere I couldn't follow. After she left, I walked through the house alone. Our house. The one I had built for us, nail by nail. It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a memory someone had left the lights on inside. And still, I waited. I waited for a message, a call, a sign that I was still in her thoughts. But silence is its own kind of message. And it was getting louder. Some truths don't arrive with a scream. They slip in through the cracks, slow, quiet, inevitable. For days after Sarah's retreat, I lived in that tension. Every buzz of my phone made my heart jump. Every silence stretched longer than the last. When she finally returned, there was no hug, no excitement, no warmth. Just a quick hey as she rolled her suitcase through the front door and disappeared upstairs before I could ask about anything. I stood there in the hallway watching her shadow glide across the landing, wondering how something so familiar could feel so foreign. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek, poured herself a coffee, and said, "I've got to catch up on emails," like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't just crossed a line we couldn't uncross. I was starting to lose my grip on what was real and what was paranoia. Was I imagining things? Reading too much into pauses, glances, absences? I needed something, anything to anchor me to the truth, whether it broke me or not. It came in the most unceremonious way possible, an email. No subject line. No message body. Just an attachment. It landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning, right before a meeting I didn't end up attending. I stared at it for a long time, the cursor hovering over the paperclip icon, my stomach in knots. Part of me wanted to delete it. To walk away and pretend it didn't exist. Because opening it meant acknowledging that what I feared might actually be true. And if it was, then everything changed. But I clicked. The photo wasn't blurry or vague. It was crystal clear. Sarah, in the red dress I had helped her zip up just 3 nights before, sat at an outdoor table lit by string lights. Her hair was down, flowing across her shoulders. She was laughing, leaning into the man beside her, Greg. His hand rested on her thigh. Her arm draped across the back of his chair. There was no room for misinterpretation. No angle where that could be called professional. She wasn't being coerced, wasn't trapped in an awkward conversation. She was comfortable, int*mate, present, and she wasn't where she told me she would be. That was the night she said she'd be at a team bonfire, somewhere 2 hours north. Barely any signal out there, she texted. Might be off the grid tonight. But this wasn't a cabin in the woods. This was a rooftop bar in the middle of the city, one I recognized immediately. I had taken her there for her birthday 2 years ago. We danced under those same lights. She had said it was one of her favorite places on earth. Now it belonged to someone else. The shock didn't hit all at once. Came in waves. First I felt cold, then nauseous, then oddly numb. I stared at the photo for what must have been an hour, memorizing every detail. The way her fingers curled around her wine glass. The way Greg's head tilted toward hers. The softness in her eyes. It was the kind of expression people wore when they felt safe, understood, wanted. She used to look at me that way. I got up, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the man looking back. There were shadows under my eyes, lines on my forehead I hadn't noticed before. When had I aged this much? When had I started walking around like a ghost in my own life? The photo was still open on my computer when I returned. I didn't close it. I needed to see it. I needed to let the truth settle in. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. That night, Sarah came home late again. She kissed me on the forehead like a nurse checking on a patient and said, "Long day. I'm wiped." She smelled like perfume and red wine. She didn't ask about my day. She didn't notice the silence in the room. I didn't mention the email. I didn't show her the photo. Not yet. Instead, I nodded. "You should get some rest." She smiled, thanked me, and disappeared upstairs. I sat in the dark for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I didn't scream into a pillow. I just sat there, trying to figure out when exactly I had lost her. And why she hadn't told me. That was the part one couldn't wrap my head around. Not just the betrayal, but the silence. The ease with which she had let it happen. The comfort with which she lived this double life. Like it was normal. Like it didn't tear at the seams of everything we'd built. I remembered helping her choose that red dress. She tried on 3 before that one. I told her she looked stunning in it. I'd meant it. She laughed, said, "It's a little too much, maybe." And I said, "Not for you." Now I knew who she'd worn it for. Over the next few days, I moved through the world in slow motion. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled at neighbors. But inside, I was unraveling. Everything around me felt staged. Our house, our routines, even our conversations, when we had them, felt like a script she was reciting to keep up appearances. I started paying more attention. Not because I needed more evidence, but because I couldn't stop myself. Her phone would buzz, and she'd swipe the screen before I could glance over. She'd step outside to take calls. When I walked into a room, she'd close her laptop or minimize a window like she'd been caught sneaking cookies. I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was watching her slowly confirm what I already knew. I kept the photo, saved it in a private folder. Not to confront her with it, but to remind myself I wasn't crazy. That was the hardest part. For weeks, I had felt like I was losing my mind, like I was manufacturing distance where there wasn't any. But now I knew I had been right all along. Every strange shift in her behavior had a reason. And it wasn't stress. It wasn't work. It wasn't us drifting apart naturally. It was Greg. That weekend, I pretended to go on a fishing trip with a buddy. I needed space, real space. Not just distance, but clarity. I turned off my phone, drove 2 towns over, checked into a motel, and sat in silence for 2 days. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post. I didn't cry. I thought about everything. And the more I thought, the clearer it became. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want excuses. I didn't even want revenge. What I wanted was peace, truth, an exit from the slow-motion collapse I'd been living through. On the drive back, I took the long way, passed through small towns, listened to old playlists we used to sing to, and felt a strange sense of mourning. Not just for Sarah or the relationship, but for the man I used to be, the one who believed love, if tended to carefully, could survive anything. That man was gone now. When I got home, Sarah was in the kitchen making pasta. She looked up, smiled. Hey, how was the trip? Quiet, I said, setting my keys down. Catch anything? Nope, I lied. She went back to stirring the sauce, humming some song I didn't recognize. The domesticity of it all was almost laughable. I wondered if she thought things were fine now. Balanced. Like a lie could be wallpapered over with marinara and Chardonnay. I almost told her then. Almost pulled out my phone and dropped the photo between us like a grenade. But I didn't. Because I realized in that moment I didn't need her reaction. I already had everything I needed. A week passed after I saw the photo. A week of pretending. Pretending I didn't know. Pretending we were still us. Every conversation with Sarah became a surreal exercise in restraint. She'd ask if I'd picked up more oat milk and I'd nod like the man who hadn't watched his wife melt into someone else's arms in a picture he couldn't unsee. She'd mention deadlines or client dinners and I'd play along like I didn't already know which dinner she actually meant. I didn't bring it up. I didn't ask questions. And she didn't volunteer anything. That was the game now, avoidance is survival. A cold war waged over folded laundry and silent meals. I had to get out of the house. I told her I needed a day at the countryside property. The one we had built together. Our sanctuary. We'd bought that land before the wedding, 5 acres of rolling hills, a stone fireplace on the porch, wildflowers that took over the field every spring. I built that house with my own hands. Nights and weekends. Poured the foundation myself. Sanded every floorboard. Designed the porch just wide enough for 2 chairs and a coffee table so we could sit on Sunday mornings with mugs and bare feet and quiet. She used to call it our forever. That was before forever meant nothing. I hadn't been back in weeks. It hurt to think about the place. But something in me needed to be there again, even if just for a few hours, to remember that not every part of my life was fake. That I had once built something real. I drove out early on a Saturday. The sun was high by the time I pulled off the gravel road and onto the familiar path that led up the hill. I expected silence. Stillness. Maybe the breeze through the trees, a few deer cutting across the field. What I didn't expect was voices. Laughter. Children. At first, I thought I had the wrong day, that maybe one of the neighbors was hosting something and the sound carried farther than usual. But as I got closer, I slowed to a crawl. My hands gripped the wheel tight. I pulled the truck up behind a cluster of trees just off the driveway and cut the engine. There, on the porch I built with Sarah, sat 4 people. Sarah, Greg, and 2 kids. A girl and a boy, maybe 6 and 8. A blanket was spread out over the porch steps, layered with fruit platters, sandwiches, a pitcher of lemonade sweating in the late morning sun. Sarah was barefoot, wearing the oversized sweatshirt she used to steal from my side of the closet. Her hair was in a messy bun, her cheeks flushed from the heat. She looked light, like a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. Greg was leaning against the railing, holding a paper plate, laughing at something the boy said. Sarah passed the girl a slice of watermelon and wiped juice from her chin with a napkin. The girl giggled, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist. And Sarah hugged her back. Not awkwardly. Not like someone who didn't know these children. Like someone who belonged with them. I sat frozen in my truck, hidden behind the tree lean, the warmth of the sun doing nothing to stop the chill crawling up my spine. This wasn't an affair. This was a second life. A parallel reality spun out from our real one, where Sarah had taken pieces of what we built and stitched them into something new with someone else. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here. Greg's arm rested casually behind Sarah as they sat on the porch swing. Their knees touched. He leaned in to whisper something, and she threw her head back, laughing. It wasn't just the laughter that hit me. It was the ease. The comfort. The kind of body language you don't fake. I thought I'd seen the worst of it already. I thought the photo was the final blow. I was wrong. This picnic, this performance of family on my porch, in my house, with my furniture, this was the worst of it. Because it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. It was rehearsed. It was something they'd done before. I couldn't stop staring at the kids. I didn't know their names. I didn't know where they came from. But they knew Sarah. That much was clear. The boy handed her a toy truck and she tucked it behind his ear like it was some private joke. The girl leaned into her side like they'd done this 100 times before. I kept thinking, how long has this been going on? How many weekends had they spent here, laughing on that swing, eating strawberries under the eaves? How many times had she laid her head on Greg's shoulder where mine used to rest? I didn't move. I didn't get out. I just watched. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. Long enough to see them pack up the picnic. Long enough to see Greg carry the girl on his shoulders down the steps while Sarah helped the boy tie his shoes. long enough to watch them all load into a white SUV and drive away like they hadn't just invaded a memory that didn't belong to them. When the sound of the engine faded, I finally stepped out of the truck. My legs felt heavy like I was walking underwater. I stood in the middle of the driveway staring at the house. Our house. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. The porch swings swayed in the breeze, still creaking from their weight. Crumbs from their lunch dotted the blanket, a juice box left half-finished on the table. I walked over slowly, picking it up, turning it over in my hand like it might tell me something I didn't already know. Everything was the same. But it had all changed. They had made themselves at home. No, not at a home. At my home. The place I built with Sarah. The place we painted together, argued over cabinet colors, danced in the kitchen barefoot on the first night we moved in. The place where we promised to grow old. And now it was just a backdrop for someone else's life. A stage set with the props of my past, repurposed for a play I hadn't auditioned for. I walked around the porch, touching the railing I had sanded smooth, the stone hearth I had laid by hand, the window frames I had painted white because Sarah liked how the light looked in the mornings. I touched everything like it might tether me to reality. Like it might remind me that once it was all real. But the truth was, it had been emptied of me. She had rewritten the story. And I was no longer in it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even throw the juice box. I just sat down on the swing that would warm under me and listened to the wind move through the tall grass. I don't know how long I stayed. At some point, the sun started to dip and I realized I couldn't bear to sleep under that roof. Not anymore. Not after seeing what it had become. So I locked up. I turned off the porch light. And I left the house behind. The only thing I took with me was the blanket they'd left behind. I didn't know why. Maybe as proof. Maybe to remind myself that I hadn't imagined any of it. As I drove back toward the city, I didn't feel rage. I felt absence. A kind of hollowing out I didn't have words for. Because now I knew exactly where I stood. Not beside her. Not behind her. Not even in the frame. Just outside. Watching. The drive back from the countryside was quiet, too quiet. Not just in the literal sense, though the highway was almost empty and the sky was dimming into dusk. It was a silence that seeped into my chest. No music. No podcasts. No noise in my head trying to rationalize or question or fill the empty space. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. Anger requires something to push against, something alive. What I felt was colder. Still. Like someone had turned a switch inside me and drained out the static. I had seen what I needed to see. The truth had revealed itself and now there was no going back to the place where doubt could be considered protective. No more should I bring it up? No more maybe I misread it. No more clinging to vague explanations or benign lies she didn't even bother making believable. It was real. She was in it. And I wasn't. And the worst part? She had grown comfortable there. At home even. Not like someone slipping away in confusion or guilt, but like someone who had taken up residence in a life built in the shadows of the one we used to have. A life so steady and so lived in that my absence had become normal. There was nothing left to confront. What was I going to say? You lied? She already knew. You cheated? She didn't care. I wasn't interested in scenes. In shouting. In emotional performances. I didn't want her tears or her denial or whatever brand of rationalization she'd have ready just in case. She'd already rehearsed it, I was sure. People like her didn't drift into deception without making room for the moment they got caught. But I hadn't caught her. She had handed it to me. The photo. The picnic. The life behind my back. She had left the door open. All I had to do was walk through. And I did. So now came the part where most people would say I had a decision to make. But the thing is, the decision had already been made. Not by me. By her. She had made the choice when she let Greg hold her hand under the porch light where we once promised to never grow apart. She had made the choice when she invited strangers into the home we designed together. She had made it every time she looked me in the eye, said, "I love you," and then went to build a life with someone else. So I didn't need to decide anything. I just needed to accept it. That was the moment I stopped asking questions. I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. And I started collecting the truth. Not to expose her. Not to confront her. But for me. For my own sanity. My own clarity. To make sure that later, when the loneliness crept in, when the memories played tricks on me, I could look at the evidence and remember, no, you weren't crazy. You weren't imagining it. You saw what you saw. You felt what you felt. You were betrayed. I started documenting everything. Not obsessively. Not like some jealous husband spiraling in secret. Methodically. Quietly. Like a historian cataloging the end of something sacred. I created a folder on my computer. I titled it plainly, End. I copied the photo there, the one of Sarah and Greg under the string lights, her in the red dress I zipped up that evening, his hand resting like it belonged on her thigh. I uploaded *TS of texts. The ones where she said she was staying late at work on nights I now knew she wasn't. Bank statements. Calendar entries. Uber receipts. A photo of the picnic blanket left on our porch, the juice box still half full beside a tiny plastic dinosaur. Every detail mattered. Not because I needed to convince anyone else. Because I needed to remember. I needed to hold onto the facts when nostalgia tried to rewrite the script. Because nostalgia would come. I knew it. That's what it does. It wraps the past in gauze and makes you question whether the pain was ever that bad to begin with. I wasn't going to let it trick me. I made a rule for myself, no second guessing. I would not downplay what happened. I would not try to fix something that wasn't broken but abandoned. This was no longer a crisis. It was a conclusion. I began preparing for the exit one step at a time. I started researching apartments. Modest ones. Places with small balconies and street parking and laundry down the hall. I didn't need a grand new beginning. I just needed space. Somewhere hers had never touched. I went to the bank. Opened a new account in my name. Quietly shifted the automatic deposits from our joint one. Changed passwords. Backed up my phone. Not because I expected her to take anything, but because I didn't want to need anything from her again. I moved with calm precision. A man who had nothing left to panic about. I stopped asking where she was when she came home late. I stopped texting her during the day. I stopped trying. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't want to acknowledge the unraveling. Either way, we had entered the part of the story where silence said everything. At night, I would lie in bed and look up at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles in the dark, wondering if she was texting him beside me. If she was lying there in our bed, thinking of how to shift her life fully into his arms. Or maybe she wasn't thinking at all. Maybe she had already decided I would let it slide. That I would swallow it like a bitter pill and pretend we were okay. She didn't know I was leaving. Not yet. But I knew. And that made all the difference. I started packing small things, just the essentials. I tucked them into boxes and left them in my car's trunk. Every day, a little more disappeared. Shirts. Books. The camera she bought me last Christmas that I had barely used. One day it would be the toothbrush. The next, the spare set of keys. Until there would be nothing left of me in the house we used to call home. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And peace, I was learning, came not in the confrontation, but in the quiet, steady reclaiming of self. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. No friends. No family. No warning. This wasn't their heartbreak to carry. It was mine. And I was going to walk through it without asking anyone to hold the weight. One night, while Sarah was out late again, I sat in the kitchen and wrote myself a letter. Not to her. Not to anyone else. To me. I folded it and placed it inside the end folder. Titled it, Remember This. It said, she stopped choosing you. You gave her every chance to come back, and she walked further away each time. She looked you in the eye and lived another life behind your back. You loved her. That was real. But she didn't stay. And that's not your fault. Don't forget. Don't go back. You deserve to be chosen. You deserve to be whole. Go. I read it every morning after that. Just once. Just to keep my footing. Sarah kept pretending. Or maybe she truly believed I didn't know. Maybe she thought we were still playing house. Still good enough. Still salvageable. But we weren't. And I wasn't going to give her the luxury of a dramatic ending. There would be no fight. No ultimatum. Only absence. I would leave quietly. But I wouldn't leave empty. I would take everything that was still mine. My dignity, my truth, my peace. And I would leave the rest behind.